All right, thanks for joining us for another episode of Consumer Trial Lawyer Academy. Today we're talking about taking depositions, and in this sense, we're not necessarily talking about defending depositions of our clients, although we'll probably have a separate video on how I do those things. But basically, we're talking about taking your witnesses in your case in chief for your burden of proof. So, again, I'm Nick Wooten. I've been practicing for 26 years. I have tried more cases than I can keep count of, more than 100 jury trials, more than 1,000 bench trials, and counting. There's nothing that I like to do more than to get in the courtroom. You know, in a perfect world, I would have folks that could get the cases ready and line them up, and I would knock them down. You know, if I didn't have anything else to do in life, I would try to be in the courtroom, you know, twice a month in a good case. But, you know, obviously, if you practice law for very long, you know, that's a very rare scenario. So, in the meantime, you know, we do it all. We get it ready from A to B, Alpha to Omega, beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation, whatever you want to call it. And over that time, I've taken what seems like 1 billion depositions of all kinds of witnesses, up and down, everything from, you know, lay witnesses. I heard the crash, turned around and saw the cars smoking, or, you know, the friends and family witnesses who talk about how, you know, a defendant's misconduct has harmed their friend or loved one, to the most complex experts in all kinds of fields, and of course many a hundred corporate defendant, and all kinds of others. So if you've never done much of this, you know, hopefully what I'm giving you will help you. But a few things that are always important to me that you know, are just non-negotiable. We're always going to treat the witness with respect. We're always going to be as polite as we can possibly be. We are not there to badger, harass, mistreat any witness. And the reason for that is, you know, we depose witnesses, we videotape witnesses, and there are times when that videotape testimony is going to be played in the courtroom. A wonderful friend of mine who's an amazing trial lawyer, you know, told me a long time ago when I was a baby lawyer and we were in a break in this CEO's deposition in this products case that I'd gotten them to jump in and co-counsel with me, and we were up in somewhere in the Northeast, in a place I used to call the armpit of the earth. We'd been going up there for months, taking all these corporate depositions, and we'd finally gotten to the CEO. And, you know, my philosophy was just to kill the CEO. You know, we just want to bludgeon this guy for this terrible thing that they were doing. And, you know, my colleagues being so nice to him, and I'm getting so frustrated, and the guy's being, you know, a real ass. And we take a break, and I'm like, man, what are you doing? Like, why aren't we crushing this guy? Like, he's just, you know, he's an ass. We should just kill him, axe murder him, you know. And my buddy looks at me and goes, Nick, you know, there's no chance in the world we're ever getting this guy to come to your neck of the woods to testify. So the only thing the jury's ever going to see is this video. And he's like, I learned the hard way a long time ago that if I'm pissed off and angry and we start clipping this deposition, that, you know, what's going to happen is everybody on the jury is just going to wonder why I'm so pissed off and why I'm treating this person so badly, and they're not going to hear all the crazy shit this guy's saying. So he said, you know, I'm not going to lose my cool. I'm not going to yell at him. I'm not going to abuse him. I'm just going to keep being nice and let him keep saying dumb shit. And I thought to myself, well, he's the expert, right? And so many more years passed by. And I was getting a case ready for trial in Chicago. Had a colleague on the other side who was taking my client's treating physician's deposition. And this doctor was, cardiologist who was doing a wonderful job balancing a very complex set of factors with my client. And he had been treating her for a couple of years while this mortgage company had been mistreating her. And, he had come to the conclusion that her problems had stepped up in severity from a non-life-threatening condition to a life-threatening condition due to stress. And, he had explained that that was a diagnosis of exclusion. In other words, he could find no other cause for this change in her condition but stress. So my colleague on the other side, who will remain unnamed, was extremely righteously indignant about this doctor's opinions. And so we were taking this doctor's videotape deposition, and the doctor was 3 times as smart as all the rest of us in the room put together. And this lawyer's just losing his mind and just abusive and insulting and over the top and, denigrating and demeaning and all these things that make people hate lawyers. And we take our first break and we're out in the hallway, and I'm with my co-counsel, and this defense lawyer colleague comes by me, and I stop him and I'm like, hey colleague, hey friend, like, did somebody kick your dog on the way down here today? And he's like, what do you mean? He's rough and gruff. I'm like, you're like incredibly angry at this doctor who's just trying to keep this lady alive. And I'm like, it kind of makes you look like an ass, and you're not really an ass. You never had a lot of pleasant conversations. I know you're a good lawyer. Like, why are you going this route? Do you think this is helpful? And he's like, well, don't tell me how to take my deposition, blah, blah, blah. And I stopped. I said, listen, I'm not telling you how to take your deposition. I said, what happens if this video has to get played to a jury? What do you think people are going to think about the way you're treating this man? Because it's pretty over the top. And, normally I would never say this, but it was over the top, Don't tell me how to take my depositions. I'll do what I want to do. And I'm like, well, have at it, brother, and I just shut up. So we go back into the deposition, and this goes on for another hour. And, a doctor's deposition in these types of cases is normally a 30 to 40 minute affair. And this goes on for 2.5 hours, just being an ass to this doctor. And of course, the doctor was very calm, and he was repeatedly educating the guy on why he was wrong, and, explaining to him that he was essentially ignorant and didn't understand what he was saying, all while this guy's rah, screaming at him, Well, lo and behold, our doctor was on a religious holiday during the trial, which had been moved because the defendants asked for an additional month to get ready. And so he was unavailable. Guess what that means for those who are unacquainted? It means we played the video. It means we took this video where this lawyer had had 2.5 hours of questions just being an ass. And I had sat there and taken very careful notes, and I knew what the doctor had said. And, so when it became my turn to ask the questions, I only had just a couple of questions. They were the normal things. Doctor, you've reached this diagnosis by excluding every other known possible cause of the conditions that Ms. Hammers or my clients had. He was like, that's correct. And all your opinions are to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. That's correct. Doctor, I appreciate you sitting here today. I know it's been a long, deposition, whatever, and let him go. And so we get through the deposition and we get ready for trial. And of course, it's time for trial, and they don't want to play the video. They're trying to exclude the doctor because he's unavailable. And of course, great trial judge that we had said he's unavailable. He's going to testify. So we have to clip the video. We clipped that 2.5 hours of abuse down into about 30 minutes. We get through playing that for the jury. And this judge allowed jurors to ask questions. And up to that point in the trial, no one had asked a question. But when that video got through playing, there was a question. And so the question came up, and the judge looked at it, and he didn't even call us up there to hear it. He said, the question is, who was questioning the doctor in this deposition? And of course, my colleague, who had seemed so angry and so upset and so, obnoxious, the jury sat there and listened to him essentially berate this man for 30 or 40 minutes, however long the clips were that we had to use, because he was the only one that really asked any medical questions, and all the doctor's answers were good, so I didn't have to clean them up. So they essentially listened to this guy abuse this doctor for 30 or 40 minutes, and they were really pissed off about it. So, of course, that guy, he has to sheepishly raise his hand and acknowledge that, yes, I am the asshole. I'm the guy who was abusing this poor doctor for no reason other than I'm an asshole lawyer. I mean, he was fitting the stereotype. And, our jury, they were all just shaking their head at the guy when he raised his hands. And you could just tell they were all like super pissed. And, that was one of many things that didn't go well for that defendant at trial. We got a great verdict. It was a lesson learned for him. And it was a lesson that I had learned, thankfully, because I had great mentors at a younger age. Because there have been plenty of people that I would have loved to just grind into the dirt, that I've exercised restraint and been extremely polite, and made sure that I didn't do that for that very reason. And so the style of taking the depositions is a contrast in studies between people who don't know what they're doing and people who've done it, and people who've not tried cases and people who have. And it was interesting because that same colleague, who I still know and communicate with, he occasionally pops up on cases. He took another doctor's deposition in another case of mine 5 years later. He just popped up in to take the deposition of a doctor. And, he was so honey sweet, like he was just, couldn't have been kinder, couldn't have been more polite, couldn't have been, a better person to be. It was like the most polar opposite of what I saw in the case that I tried against him. And after the deposition, I was like, hey man, that was a great job you did that deposition, man. I thought you were super nice and polite and professional. And he said, well, Nick, it doesn't take but getting hit over the head one time really hard to know that you need to change your ways. He said, wish I'd have listened to you that day and calmed down. He said, but I had to learn the hard way. And hey, look, one thing about this business, if you're trying cases, you're going to learn one way or another. You're going to learn the hard way or the easy way. So stand on the shoulders of the people that have gone before you and find the easiest way to get where you want to be, because you don't want to do it the wrong way. Those types of things can cost you a case in their own right. If the case is already going against you, it's just a nail in the coffin that will finish you off. So never be that guy or that gal in the courtroom who's an ass gratuitously. It will just never work for you. Not that you can't get what you want. I do believe in and have learned you catch more flies with honey. There's no doubt. I explained it to a group not too long ago this way. When I was a younger lawyer, I used to grab the witnesses, pick them up over my head, run over to the cliff, and throw them off the cliff, and stand there and watch them fall to their demise below, like the old Looney Tune cartoons, you know. And as I got a little gray hair and got more experience and learned from some super lawyers, what I would say my style now is that I tell the witness that there is a cliff. I tell the witness that I would like them to come over to the edge of the cliff and look down and see that there is in fact a cliff and that there's a great drop off. And then I invite the witness to walk off the cliff, and you know, the witness usually obliges, and then I invite the witness to go ahead and fall off, having walked out off the cliff, to just go ahead and then fall. And then of course the witness is like, oh, I'm so happy to fall off your cliff that you have walked me over and invited me to walk out on. So, you know, if you imagine the old Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, you know, cartoons where there's dust and the coyote's running and he runs through the dust, and then you know, the dust clears and he hears meep meep, and you know, the roadrunner standing on the cliff and the coyote's off the cliff to the side, and he looks down and goes, oh shit, and he falls. That's more of the analogy of how it's properly done if you really want to know what it should look like in a deposition process. So by all means, invite your witnesses over to the cliff, explain that it's a cliff, ask them to walk off the cliff, and then invite them to fall. Don't pick them up and throw them off the cliff. That's the key portion of taking the depositions the right way. No matter how angry you would like to be, no matter how frustrated you would like to be, it does you no good. You're not going to get what you want. The only way to get what you want is to, for me, I go into kind of an emotional Zen state. I don't care what the answer is. Don't let yourself get caught up in exactly how the question's answered. Don't try to force someone into a pigeonhole to say exactly what you want them to say. You know, when you ask a corporate witness a yes or no question and they ramble for 10 minutes with bullshit, people know that they've just rambled for 10 minutes with bullshit. And the way you handle that is thank you for that response. But my question was a little bit simpler. I asked you, does this document say X? And that was more or less a yes or no question. And if they continue to refuse to answer, you kind of repeat that process. And then, you know, like the third time they give you nonsense, you can blow up the document on the screen, you point to it with your little highlighter, and you go, does this document say X? Yes or no? And just by being polite, kind, but, you know, controlling, eventually you will drag it out of them. Some people will be smart and they'll just answer your questions. Some of these people think they're smarter than you and they will be cute. And those are the ones who will inevitably look like jackasses and fools in front of a jury. But don't be the person who has to not use a videotape deposition because you were an ass to a witness. You know, it'll get you nowhere. One of my greatest friends and mentors in the law, he was with me when I took the deposition of R.K. Arnold, the MER CEO in Washington, D.C. And, you know, that was during the financial crisis, and I was incredibly pissed at people losing their homes and people being made homeless, and the galling criminality of the mortgage foreclosure industry and the recklessness of the MER system. And so I'd fought and scratched and fought and scratched and fought and scratched in our cases to get that deposition. Got it. And went to D.C. to take it. Of course, we arrived the night before, 6 p.m. the night before 9 a.m. deposition. you know, they dropped 3,700 pages of documents on us. Fairly typical corporate defendant move. And, you know, what they want is for you to either cancel the deposition or F up the procedure or whatever. What they don't expect is that you will take an extra Adderall, stay up all night and go through 3,700 documents, process those documents, and actually be prepared to examine the witness on those documents. But that's what I did. Right by myself. I sat in that hotel room all night, didn't go to sleep, went through every single one of them. And because I was familiar with everything else that I had gotten on MERS, I was able to separate the wheat from the chaff, figure out what I actually needed. Called a cab. This is the days before being able to upload everything online and go to a Kinko's. Called a cab. Went over to the Kinko's. It's the all-night Kinko's. Got my copies made. Came back to the hotel, took a shower, drank some coffee, had some breakfast, went to a deposition. You know, my colleague was with me. He knew what they had done, but he didn't stay up all night with me to do this. He didn't know how I was going to handle it. We got to the deposition. I started out with the deepest document into the 3,700 pages that was relevant, just so they knew that I had been through all 3,700 pages. And then I proceeded to thrash that guy for, 2 hours in or an hour and a half in. We take the first break. We get into the lobby. My colleague's like, this is the best deposition I've ever seen. This is incredible. This is $1 zillion case. Super excited, wildly, euphoric. This is going great. We get to the lunch break and, another hour and a half or 2 hours. And he's a little calmer. He's like, man, I don't even know if this company can survive that deposition. It's like, this is like, you know what this guy said, you're killing them. Like they may have to shut down. Of course, since he was financing the case, that wasn't a very attractive option. We take the 2 o'clock break and he just looks sick by that point. He's like, just pale and nauseated. He's like, Nick, I don't even know if this company will exist in a week. Like, they're going to have to go shut down. When this becomes public, they're never going to survive this. And I mean, he was just almost physically ill. So, I'm sort of trying to process this, and he keeps asking me, how much more do you have? How much further is this going to go? I mean, is there anything else that you can do with this guy? And I'm like, oh, I got lots, man. People know me. They know I'm like, I'm going to kill this guy. Well, yeah, I mean, we go for another hour and a half or whatever, and we adjourn the deposition, and my colleague and I go back to the airport to get on a plane to fly home, and we're on the plane, we're flying home, and he's having his little evening toddy, which is his normal routine. You've got to know him. He's the greatest guy in the world. He always was prone to these bits of wisdom in those moments, and he was always trying to pour into me. For some reason, he saw something in me, and thankfully by that time in my life, I was smart enough to listen. But he said something profound that day. He's like, Nick, he said, I have to compliment you on the preparation you did for that deposition. He goes, you were wildly over-prepared. And he said, and you fundamentally destroyed that guy, and you probably ended his career, quite honestly. He said, but, there's a suggestion I want to make I think will help you, because I had to learn it myself. And I'm like, of course, whenever he said anything like this, I'm like, please tell me. And he said, Nick, I had to learn empathy. He said, I was a lot like you. I was very righteously indignant as a young lawyer at the way people were being treated. And it took me a long time to realize that these poor people that they're sending as corporate witnesses or these poor employees that are caught up in these transactions, that they're just people too. And most of them are just doing a job, trying to pay their bills. They don't understand exactly what's happening. A lot of them are, as you know, they're just cogs in a machine. And it just so happened their name cropped up in our case, and so they're a witness. But they're not a grand conspirator, and they're not out there trying to harm other people. They're just like you and I, trying to take care of their families, pay their bills, do their jobs. And he said, you know, the moment that I understood that and gained some empathy and some understanding and some, frankly, compassion towards those people who were having to do that job, he said, I became an infinitely better trial lawyer. My results improved dramatically. The testimony that I was able to take and get from witnesses improved markedly. And, you know, it really resonated with me, because I was, you know, on this, what should be celebratory plane ride home from destroying what most of us in consumer law considered to be one of the great villains of corporate America at that point. And I'd exposed him for being an ignorant person that had no position being, no business being the position he was in, who had no understanding of what was actually going on with his company and could not understand the massive amounts of wrongdoing that were occurring there, and, you know, was literally upsetting the apple cart, with, you know, property recording systems all over the country and everything else, and arguably creating problems with the enforceability of mortgages, which obviously the government later overlooked. But, you know, it should have been a joyous occasion, and slaughtered the dragon, so to speak. But it was very bittersweet in a way, because in essence, it did not have its desired effect at the end of the day. And, you know, there were a lot of, you know, personal suffering that still occurred. We didn't accomplish our goals. We didn't stop that company. But we made him a sympathetic character, because I just crushed him so badly that people felt sorry for him rather than angry at him. And that's not where you want to be. So when we're taking depositions, we don't ever want to be that guy. We don't ever want to be that gal. We want to be the person who's handled it tactfully, politely, firmly. We want to be the person that's over-prepared. We want to be the person who has everything in place that they need to properly execute the deposition. But we want to handle, especially what we'll call the innocents, the people who are just caught up in this, as politely as we can, so that we don't take away from the impact of what they actually say in their testimony by the way we conduct ourselves. We are storytellers, and we are telling our story through live witness testimony. And so to tell our stories, we want to be the narrator who gets the story out without becoming the story or a sideshow. And that has become my philosophy. I can point to that lesson from my mentor as a great turning point for me.